Happy Saturday, everybody. Feels a little bit like a lazy Saturday. Our Sportsnet podcast crew is ready to go. We're having a little bit of fun. I'm having a noticed all of a sudden technical difficulty. Let me fire that up and fix that. There we go. We are not going to be wasting much time today, that's for sure.
Let's go while we're young.
Yeah. On the eve of the first ever expansion draft in eMLB's 22 real-life year history. Time flies when you're having fun. But on the eve, we've got a little bit of fun to do with you. We are about ready to go. Let's get her started.
Welcome. Come in. Fresh victims for my ever-growing army of the undead.
Sir, you have to let go of the button.
Oh, son of a bitch.
It is as close as it can come to that draft being ready to go. Tomorrow is the day, and it is for us now time for our expansion draft. We're having a little fun. We're goofing off here in this pretend studio that we've got. Why not? Zoom makes it available. What the heck? Hey, how are you, gang? It's Commish LB. Good to have you here. Thanks for coming in. To my right, that's this way. Your left, my right, Ryan Hetzer from the Seattle Mariners, who'll be paying very close attention to what one of these two teams in particular has planned, as he will be in the same division as the Portland Stags. To my far left, you'll know him as Brennan McGuirk. He is our Baltimore Orioles GM and also one half of the Here's Why You're Wrong crew that you see here pretty regularly on Sportsnet, particularly over on our YouTube channel, which if you've never been at the YouTube channel, there's the link. What are you waiting for? Why haven't you hit that yet? Because there's some pretty good stuff. This is the metaverse. Yes, it is. Exactly what Harris said. And over just right next door here, long-time 1.0 good friend of our show, Jared Rollins, who, I do it all the time. He is what we all wish to be. He is a real-life Major League exec, and he still puts up with us. But he is Senior Director of Communications for the real-life Cincinnati Reds, and here, he kind of just GMs the team, you know? So all the armchair stuff he's doing for real in his head, he gets to do here to get to scratch that itch. Oh, darn it, I forgot to turn off all of the stuff here. So that's just going to make a mess. Give me 1 sec as I do that. We have a few different things we're going to do today. This is all for fun, talking expansion draft. We've got all that we need set up for it. But before we do that, we have a little bit of administrative work to do here. First things first, let me just make sure that I turn everything on. I do want to thank Stroker Race. Hey, I loved that show growing up. Burt Reynolds, you the man. I can't do his laugh, though. No one can. You just have to be a certain type of person to do it, and frankly, I don't. lack of mustache here, you know what I mean? Let me quickly just make sure I have all of my alerts disabled. Apologies. Thank you for anybody who is planning to do some stuff today. But frankly, so we don't interrupt our guests, we are making sure that the whole house is properly disinfected and all of that good stuff. One last button for me to press, and if I know what I'm doing, I don't. We should be good to go. Again, thanks to anyone who is planning to do any good stuff today. We're going to do our best to pay close eye on our clock. In fact, what I think we will do, I will force a commercial to take place. Again, I'm sorry that I've got to do those stinking commercials, but I got my first of 5 kids getting ready to go to college here this fall. And you got to look under every stone. You know, if you're a parent, you know what I mean. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt for a fair share of you, but it's my turn, and we got to take what we get. So, again, we apologize in advance, but we got to do what we got to do. So, before we get to our illustrious group, let's remove ourselves from the camera. It's the Wheel of Names. We have 2. That's 2. 1, 2. 2 different specific wheel spins that we're going to do. Do the Wheel of Fortune song in your head if you wish. Here is what we're going to be doing. The first spin of this wheel is going to determine who officially will pick first in tomorrow's expansion draft. That's all that will do. It is serpentine after that, so that means the other team will pick twice, etc., 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 for 75 rounds. 150 players will be selected off of the board. 5 players from every single team is going to be selected. Thanks to Brennan McGuirk, who put a spreadsheet together, we will be sharing along a Google Doc. That's called a snake draft for those of you that don't know what the word serpentine is. Come on, Kamish. What is that kind of word? Next thing you know, I'll start breaking out anti-disestablishmentarianism or something like that. Oh, I just did. I'm sorry. So the first selection is going to determine who has the first selection tomorrow. And then one more spin of the wheel with this specific format that you see. And that format will help us determine who is getting the first pick of the 2027 draft. As a reminder, both of these expansion teams will get picks number 1 and 2 of every single round of this summer's draft only. It will be randomly selected based on the parameters we just said. And then after that, it will be based on win-loss record. So, of course, this season, that means the Oakland Athletics, who had the worst record in the league, will pick 3rd for this particular draft. I thought about doing that, Ken, but, you know, in all honesty, it just makes more sense to leave it completely up to chance. It really does. So with that, this is, there's one other set of spins we're going to do after this. Those set of spins will be specifically establishing. Will we do a lottery draft like MLB in a season or 2? Lottery draft? No. I just had to think, what are you talking about? And like JR says, I am pretty much against lotteries. We have tanking rules in place. We monitor any team that is going down in a blaze of glory. Is that what John Bon Jovi was singing about? Teams trying to vie for the number 1 pick? Probably. All right. Let's get this first pick out of the way. This spin that you will be watching is determining who gets first selection tomorrow. Remember, that means the next team, the other team, will get the next 2 picks after, etc., etc., etc. Spinning we go. Oh, the MLB logo is all Disney-like. It will be It will be the Portland Stags. Portland will get first selection in the expansion draft. Let me switch. So you know what? That means I got to change every gall-dang round. Every gall-dang round because it is backwards. Game chose Portland first. So now, rigged? What do you mean rigged? Are you trying to say that Craig Cheeks paid? Craig Cheeks is the owner of the Portland Stags in our universe. If you reset the order manually and go serpentine, it won't automatically fill it in. That's a pretty darn good question. I will find out. You started alphabetically and the machine wants some chaos. Well, apparently it watches The Witcher. Hey, Stroker. Welcome to the show, and thank you for saying hello, and glad you love the wheel. You need to use the wheel for drafting. All right, hey, we just found out how a real Major League Baseball executive plans to do their drafting strategy. Spin it on the wheel, yo. What? How'd that 2020 rated player get on this first round wheel list? Someone sabotaged. My money would be on Andrew. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yep. All right, so the Portland Stags have won the first selection in tomorrow's pick. Andrew's totally a troublemaker indeed, yes. And the Wheel of Misfortune, it might be. It might be because the next spin that you see, this next spin is going to determine the number one selection of the 2027 amateur draft to be held at All-Star Weekend this coming season. Remember, this is the only time that this will be done. After that, it is win-loss record from there. If I stalled long enough, pretty good at that whole game show type of, if this goes Stags, then we will have to investigate the software. Well, you can go to wheelofnames.com and find out if there's any scams on it, but I totally disavow any knowledge of whether or not that happens. And they, as far as I know, now, you know, my eyes play trickery on me, but as far as I know, these are all equal size. There are 10 selections of each team on this list. Never get back-to-back heads on flipping a coin, so it's impossible. Okay. Should I have predictions put on this? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. All right, gang. Number one pick in the amateur draft will be the Stags again. Portland is going to get both of them. Meanwhile, you hear the Mon Dieu and Sacre Bleu. And Kishan.
Watch your language, you bud. We're on the air.
Kamish does not hate Canada. I'm Franco-American, dang it. Means my descendants come from La Province de Canada. LB hates Quebec. Well, no, just Montreal. It's the Habs. It's the Canadiens jersey that I can't stand. I actually really enjoyed. Fun fact, I've been to 3 Major League parks in my lifetime. Well, now 2, because Le Stade Olympique does not count anymore for the moment. But I have been to 3 parks, if you included the Expos. 2001, that was fun. There were 15,001 fans there. Red Sox just so happened to be playing while I was on a business trip. eMLB obviously biased against French speakers. Oh boy. All right. So we'll remove this. We're going to womp womp this. And now we're going to create the next list. So again, Portland has won both the expansion and the amateur draft selections for this coming season. Now we're going to do owner patience. And this first one, since Portland won the first one, we will go with them. And it's as simple as this. There are 10 different possibilities for owner patience, as well as owner spending. However, in eMLB at this moment, not that you guys would know this, but nobody has worse than a 4. So I will not allow any team to be more than one spot than the worst, especially for a team coming in for something completely random. The first selection will be for Portland. I'm going to keep this same list. It will then be for Montreal. This is for owner patience that we are doing randomly. This is going to dictate a bit on how the teams will end up having for budgets. And again, owner goals are turned off in eMLB, so that doesn't hurt as much. 1 equals no patience. Yeah, pretty much. 1 would equal former 1.0 GM Artie Alonso, who would call me, I kid you not, at 2 o'clock in the morning in a drunken stupor pissed about something over a virtual universe. 0 would equal Steve Cohen. But he'd have what, like a 12 for his owner spending? All right, again, first number you see here is for owner patience, Portland Stags. This is for Craig Cheeks. It will be a right down the middle 5. So a 5 to patience for Portland. Montreal's owner patience, Charles Bronfman. 1 equals Cody, yes. This is, again, Montreal patience. They will be a little more patient. Yes, they will. They will get a 7. No whammies, no whammies. All right, let me snooze 1 sec on the ad. All right, so we have patience in the way. Thanks to Brendan giving a little bit of explanation. For patience, spending and priority higher is better. For involvement, lower is better. Though I don't think patience and involvement will matter much in this league since owners don't have any involvement except writing checks. All right, so now we're on to spending. Back to Portland. This number matters most. Both teams start with $200 million budgets and $25 million of team cash. Maximum team cash any team can have is $42 million. Portland, for spending from their owner. Ooh, uh-oh. Could it be? Oh my goodness. No whammies and stop. They will get the coup de grace. They get a very spending. They get Steve Cohen. Can't yell Attica on that one. By the way, real quick, since I think I have it, where are you? There it is. Here was what the randoms were for Charles Bronfman. Patience was 6, will now be down to, or will be up to 7. We'll see what the spending is in a moment. I wanted to show that Portland had been prior set to be a patience of 9 and a spending of 8. So spending will be more improved, but patience is going back down. So just so you know. All right. Now we've got Montreal for their spending amount. Keep your fingers crossed there, Ken. Well, it won't be the high, but it should be right down the middle. It will be a 5. You'll have a more patient GM, but I think your winning will stay about the same. All right. We'll remove those. Now we've got a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. Should we do this a little bit more spread out like I did the other one? Let's do that. It would make more sense because there's just a little bit more. There. This is for Portland to determine Craig Cheeks' involvement. And as Brendan indicated, you want a lower number on this one. But no, we did not get to the center of the Tootsie Pop yet. Boom. Portland's involvement from their owner will be, well, it'll be a 2. Jump right over to the Expo, normal. Montreal's involvement from their owner might be a 2. It will stay at a 2, so that's probably pretty good. All right, now, can I do this? Will it let me? Yes, it will. Yay. This is our last 2 spins for our random owner settings, and we're going to set the priority. Owner spending at a 5 has got to be 7 Canadian, right? Exchange rates, yo. I don't know if Out of the Park's that smart yet. If it is, then I might do some trading through it. All right. Portland, owner priority, 1 to 5. Here we go. It will be a 3. So hopefully you're keeping score at home. We'll make those changes as well in the program right afterwards. Actually, I'll do it during the commercial and come back and show that, and then we will get to our panel. Thank you very much to my panel for their patience on this. Here's our last spin on the Wheel of Names. This is to determine the priority of the Expo's owner, and it will be a 2. There we go. So I got 2 minutes, it says. So let me edit. Oh, wait. No, not edit here. Go to front office, go to owner, edit the owner. So Portland drew a 5 on patience, a 10 on spending, a 2 on involvement, and a 3 on priority. So that means your owner, Craig Cheeks, is tolerant, generous, normal, and balanced. Our first one. And then over to Montreal. Let's change Charles Bronfman. We'll go from a 6 to a 7. 5 is the spending. It will stay there. Only other change is owner involvement. Will go from 3 to 2. That is Charles Bronfman. Bronfman is lenient, but he is an economizer. Has normal involvement, and his priority is profit. Shock. Shock indeed. All right, gang. Thank you for your patience as you just saw the first stints. We now know Portland will have first pick tomorrow. I'll also have first pick in the amateur draft as they were selected in both times on that. And now you see what our owner setup is. So we will just do a quick break, and when we come back, this panel will be ready to get going, and we will talk to you about everything expansion draft on the other side of the commercial. You are watching the preview show on the eve of the 2027 expansion draft, the first ever in 22 real-life years of eMLB as a brand doing this stuff. We will be right back. Please don't go anywhere. Coming back live, it is our pre-expansion draft show here on Fluffy Kitty Ninjas. The eMLB universe expanding to 32 teams here. We are very excited for it as we come back live. This is our Sportsnet podcast edition. Want to say thanks to our guests who are joined us here today. Starting off again to my right, your left, it is Ryan Hetzer from the Seattle Mariners. Hetz, how we doing today?
Good, Commish. Thanks for having me.
Good.
Excited to talk about the expansion draft.
Glad to have you here. We'll get your thoughts in a moment about Portland getting the number one selection picks there. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Craig Cheeks. Fictional Craig Cheeks, that is. Meanwhile, over to my immediate left, it is Jared Rollins from the Cincinnati Reds, as well as one half of our eMLB Insider podcast. Good old JR, how are we today?
Pretty good. Glad to be here. I guess I picked the short chair here, but that's all right. It's all good.
Very true. We all look a little taller here, but don't worry. It doesn't matter, size. It's how you use it, or so I've heard, So I've heard.
That's what she said.
Yes, indeed. Meanwhile, over to the immediate left, yes, Commish French. He always goes the wrong way first. It's Brendan McGurk way down on the other end. Brendan is our Baltimore GM, as well as one half of the Here's Why You're Wrong crew. Brendan, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I like the background. We ought to start using it whenever we do Here's Why You're Wrong, so that way no one has to look at Aiden's pile of trash anymore.
Okay, that's fair enough. So you guys are here on the eve, at least of this brand, a prestigious moment when we will welcome our first two teams from scratch. Montreal's broken that a little bit by getting a few guys on waivers, but we are starting with two teams that will be building their rosters from a list. Well, I think we have over 1,000 players that are eligible overall in this draft, but each team has locked 25 down, and then anybody who didn't have 4 years of professional service were automatically waived, so we're going to look at that. Let's talk on our first topic. I thought the most interesting thing we should start off here before we get into this draft is look at specific teams that each of you might have said, wow, I can't believe that guy's available, or I can't believe that they left this guy out there. So why don't I start? I'm going to start with Brendan here on this one. I want to end with Hetz because Hetz is the only one on the panel today who is directly having someone in their division. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. JR.
Yeah, we'll be in the East.
Where am I going? It would be good if I actually knew my divisions, wouldn't it? Give me one moment as I share those divisions. Let me do this real quick so everybody can see. Here is the division realignment for 2027. Again, apologies for JR. He is in the East, where the Les Expos will be joining him. Portland Stags will be going front and center into the extremely competitive American League West. So there is your division alignment. Let me get off this screen. Let me get back to our panel. So let's start with Brendan. When you scoured these lists, or when you looked and saw, hey, wow, I can't believe this player is available, what stuck out to you as most surprising players that are available for this draft?
Joe Olney for the Cubs is the number one shock to me on anybody who's not protected. Olney's a prospect. He's 24 years old, pitched really well in the minors, and by OSA standards, looks to be a fairly good pitching prospect.
Yeah, as we just pulled him up here. He's from New York. Again, you said 24 years old. He was drafted in the 20th round back in 2022. This is a guy who last season only played an A-plus ball and did an ERA under 2. Did they do this thinking that, no one's going to take him? I mean, this isn't a Rule 5, but do they think that they have 5 better players than Olney?
I have no idea, if I'll be honest with you. I think this is, I wonder if this might be an oversight. I don't know. he seems too good of a prospect to have been left alone. And this guy should be a high priority for both expansion teams, because there's going to be very few opportunities to get good young prospect type players in the expansion draft. I think this guy could be one of the first 5 players taken.
Wow, that's a big saying considering some of the names that are out there, but it is all about what strategy. We'll talk about that a little later. So now let me scoot a little closer here, JR. As the Expos come into your division, you've seen a couple moves that they have done already. What surprises you? And we'll talk about where you think players will land later. But again, same question. Which player most surprised you as being available in this?
There was a couple that really surprised me in there. I think, sort of along the lines of Brendan, taking a look at a mix of a player that has a lot of talent and, somebody that could be both for today and the future. I was really surprised to see Gene Hughes with Minnesota be unprotected, just as recently as, in 2025, he was a top 100 prospect, still a pretty young arm who doesn't have a whole lot of big league time yet, but looks like a guy who could still have a really good future as a starting pitcher. So when you're going through a rebuild like Minnesota apparently is at this point, I'm just surprised that they would leave a guy like that out there.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, as we look at Hughes's numbers, ground ball specialist, he's somebody who's known for good control. He only let up 26 walks in over basically 140 innings so far this season. And with Rochester, he had a 2.2 ERA, and over in Norfolk, he had a 1.73 ERA. Both of those were AAA level. So you got to think that a guy like Hughes is literally knocking on the door of the majors. So whether it's an oversight or just so much congestion of talent of the 25 that you're just hoping you can whistle past the graveyard and keep him, a good call. And especially maybe even more so than Olney, which makes sense to point him out from Brendan's point of view. But with Hughes being just one level away from the majors, maybe this is a guy that uses these new opportunities. There's 52 new positions available in the major leagues next season for hiring. Gene Hughes may be trying to make a big case, maybe on a different squad, or maybe he sneaks through and of the 5 that's lost puts him more front and center to stay in Minnesota. It could be interesting, but I think that's a heck of a point out from there. Ryan, what's your thoughts in regards to the most surprising player that you did not expect to be out there?
Well, we had a little list that we put together here, and Olney was on it, but a similar guy that we had, a similar profile, Tommy Migliazzo, coming out of Chicago White Sox organization. He has similar ratings, at least of our scouting, which I realized after looking at this for a few hours a day, I was looking at all through our own scouting lens, so there's always that. But Migliazzo is a guy that, mid-50s, right in that range potential, and so to see him available is a guy that was surprising to me in the same vein as Olney. A hitter I'll mention, Shervin Newton, was surprising. Just having picked him up in trade from Brendan, then to leave him protected. And he is a useful piece for sure, and not making it too much money. So I was surprised at that one as well. Another quick point, I thought that it was surprising that both all 3 of the Dodgers, the big 3, all 3 were left unprotected. I was a little surprised. I thought maybe 2 of the 3, or that he would choose to kind of make sure that at least one of them he kept, meaning of course Seager, Bellinger, and Snell.
I only say this from having so much experience of doing this and looking up at Toronto in the standings back in the 1.0 days. This seems like classic Chris in this instance. This is get a player built up and hyped up and be able to move on from them. And in this instance, he's not getting prospects. He's not getting draft picks as used to be done in 1.0. And thank God we don't do that anymore. But in this particular instance, freeing up that type of cash for an organization as with as much money as the Dodgers can have would probably be the gain there. So I bet even just one of those 3 players being selected probably makes Chris go excellent and plan his next part of world domination of 2.0. Just might.
Something similar for Philadelphia. Shervin Newton $2 million to get him is nothing for a team that has $346 million to spend.
Yep. 100%. That'll be a very interesting discussion point from there. So now let's play a different game. Next topic. Which of these teams do you think is most likely to be picked on the quickest and have all 5 of their players that they're at risk of losing be taken first? This one you might just assume is automatically going to be the teams that are the richest, but I'm curious because I've got pretty knowledgeable baseball minds in this room right now. So let's start with JR on this one. Which team you think is going to end up being officially, you took our 5, we're done here?
Yeah, to your point, I mean, obviously Houston is the, defending World Series champs, and they definitely have some guys out there that could go quick. I mean, that would be, probably the easy choice. For me, the team that stuck out to me with this was the Tigers. When you take a look at, they have 4 pitchers that I think are going to go really, really quickly in this draft, partly because there's a mix there of, guys that can make an impact at the big league level, and also, a couple of them in particular are pretty low salary wise, with Carlos Rodon and Griffin Canning. They both have pretty cheap salaries and are pretty effective pitchers when you're starting to build a pitching staff, along with Franklin Perez and then Cole Reagans, who is kind of a swingman, reliever, could be a reliever starter. I think those 4 pitchers could all go pretty fast, and then they have enough other guys that I think, the 5th guy could go off the board, not too long afterward.
Okay, very interesting. I pulled up the list. You can see to the right, again, OSA ratings are showing here. You can see the 25 players that Detroit has protected, players that are in not in any color. Dustin May was, I don't believe, he was not protected. So from an OSA perspective, he's considered to be the highest rated Tiger available. But you can see the players that are listed on there, predominantly listed as relievers, with the exception of Carlos Rodon, who I believe Steve just said he is in a 1-year deal here right now. So, good call on that. Let's go over to Ryan Hetzer. Mr. Hetz, which team do you think is most likely to have their 5 selected first?
Well, I had a simple little formula, just looking at teams that I thought had multiple early round candidates. So, at least 2 guys that would be eligible, who I thought would go in the early rounds. And then looking as well for teams with a glut of those kind of high 40s overall guys who are still a bit younger and have potentially some room to develop. So that's kind of my model. And 2 organizations stood out. Now, Houston, I won't go deeper into them because I think, JR mentioned it being the World Series champion, the fact that their roster is deep. But the Cardinals, it would be the other one that I'll talk about. I think the Cardinals have a chance to be that first team in that, I think they'll have 2 early picks in Loaizaga, Johnny Lasagna. I think he'll go pretty early, as somebody will want him in their rotation, I believe. And then one of their catchers. I mean, they really have 3 catchers that all are big league players, and Herrera and Dewey and then MJ Melendez, and they're all unprotected. So I could see those 2 going early. And then if you look at, the remainder of the guys they have unprotected, there is that glut of those high 40 guys like, Armani Sanchez, Wally Oliver, an outfielder, Lewis Thorpe, Juan Morales. So that would be, I'd see the Cardinals getting their guys snatched up first.
Interesting call as we pulled them up. And you mentioned Johnny Lasagna right away. Of course, Loaizaga making a pretty good salary. He is on a player option the following year, so he's due about $28.2 million. Might be fair if he pitches a bit more like his 2025 self, and of course he had an abbreviated season the prior year, so that didn't help. And Very good, interesting point. I'm mentioning Ivan Herrera, who really made a name for himself at the end of last season there. He was just knocking the ball all over the place, not necessarily going yard, but he was just consistently hitting and really helped the Cardinals towards the end there. Of course, they still fell short. But, yeah, a great point. I'm bringing them up. And then pretty much all three of their primary catchers are all potentially eligible here. Of course, Cardinals did bring in JT Realmuto, so they put a little bit of protection in place and figure they might be losing at least one of these guys. Brendan, who you thinking gets their to punch out their clock first with their 5 players?
I'm actually thinking Minnesota. Minnesota. Unlike a couple other teams that have a lot of top level talent that, got exposed, like the Dodgers, they have just several young but talented pitchers available. Jim Sosa, who could potentially be a starter, on Juan Wiskovich, which is an interesting name, who could also potentially be a starter. JR mentioned Gene Hughes, Dave Schaefer, and then several other guys just further down the list. I think that at least Portland, probably both of them, are going to be targeting young guys who have potential and who can be in the organization for a long time early in the draft. So that way that, because there's going to be competition for those guys early on, so you can build up your system. I think that there's several good players left available from Minnesota, and I think that they could be emptied out first.
Good call. Good call. Again, Sosa's high on that list. Louis Guillaume, who's a defensive specialist as well. And even
Peterson.
What's that?
Jack Peterson
was just gonna mention Jack Dogs. Jack Peterson is one of our CCPs that happens to be available in this instance. Whoa. Thank you to the PBE Sim Universe that just confirmed that Kamish does not know what he's doing in regards to turning off his alerts because the alert went off. Thank you to PBE Sim. Welcome. This is a special edition of Fluffy Kitty Ninjas. This is eMLBSportsNet, and we are on the eve of our first ever expansion draft, 2027 expansion draft. We will be welcoming the Montreal Expos as well as the Portland Stags here to our universe. We should do the commercial one more time with our group, right? Let's do that real quick. Again, the Montreal Expos and the Portland Stags joining the eMLB universe tomorrow, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, is when we will be doing the expansion draft. We are very excited for it. It will be a big change for what we've got going on around the universe. Again, Kamish LP here with you, along with Ryan Hetzer from the Seattle Mariners, Jared Rollins from the Cincinnati Reds, and Brendan McGuirk from the Baltimore Orioles. Let's do one more topic while we still have some time, and let's talk about what do we think the strategies are going to be for each of our respective teams. We'll start with the Montreal Expos in the National League East. That means that Jared Rollins will be dealing with them directly for the first time since 2004. eMLB will have the Expos back. We will be at a revamped Le Stade Olympique, and the Expos have already started to build their roster on acquiring players from waivers. As we take a super quick peek at what the Expos look like thus far, JoJo Booker Evan White. I thought we had one more player selected. Nope, never mind. We got Booker and White have been acquired so far by the Expos. And then, of course, 75 more players will be added here shortly. So, let's talk Expos specific. What strategies do you think Montreal going into the National League East, which it might not hurt to remind people what the division will look like? Let me do that one more time. Here is the peek on the division for you to see. So, it will be the Mets, Braves, Reds, Phillies, Pirates, Nationals, Marlins, and Expos. Yes, 8 teams per division, 4 division total. Let's start with JR here. Where do you think this organization wants to go in your division as it will be constructed?
I think I'm pretty sure, a few of us have kind of talked about this already a little bit, but, I really see the Expos being able to put together a team potentially to compete pretty early on. I think this NL East, is going to be a little bit weaker than especially the AL West that the Stags are going into. And I think it's even the weaker of the NL divisions also. So I think there's a little more opportunity for them to come in and potentially put together a competitive team pretty early on, while also still being able to look toward the long haul. So, we've already seen them pick up Evan White, somebody that's a little bit expensive, but a pretty solid first baseman, somebody that's going to make an impact right now. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them, continue to focus on bringing in guys who can help them today and not just into the future.
Well, if White does anything like he did in 2024, where he hit almost 290 and had 20-plus homers and 80-plus RBI, I don't think the Expos will be sad at that level of production for a player at $8 million. So that could be good. So do I basically get from you that you think that the Expos might be more focused on, let me see if I'm following. Do you think that the Expos might take some chances on some of the more proven stars that are unprotected? Or are you saying that they might be a little more balanced because their division isn't as tough as, say, the Stags will have?
I could see them take a chance on a couple guys. There's some of these star players that are unprotected who they do have hefty contracts, and that's why they were left unprotected. But in some of those cases, they're not contracts that are very long. Like a Noah Syndergaard, for instance. I know he hasn't looked that great the last couple of years, and he's got a pretty hefty contract, but it's just one more year. So some of these guys that they could take a chance on to kind of build a winning foundation, because again, as an expansion team, you also have to figure that you want to come in and you got a crowd or a fan base that's interested right now. They're coming in pretty energized, and you don't want to necessarily lay an egg right off the bat like you would necessarily expect an expansion team to do.
Yeah. We just took a peek at Syndergaard. He had an ERA near 7. He's been trending in the wrong direction, unfortunately, since he came over to the Red Sox. And as said, a little over $27 million. So a team that has a $200 million total budget for everything, including personnel, they'll have to be mindful and can only go to the well on certain players like that so often. So interesting call based on that. We'll stay on Montreal, and we'll now get Ryan Hetzer's opinion. What kind of strategy do you expect that Montreal would play as they enter the NL East?
I do generally agree with JR that they could potentially, you could see a scenario where they could compete. You look at the teams, the Phillies were a bit of a surprise this year, and the Nationals were down. And then the rest of the mix were all really teams that were kind of, either down or maybe on the way up, but maybe not quite there, maybe a year away or so. And so when you look at that, that's one thing. So I think you have to be a little bit careful with that, though. I mean, as an expansion franchise, if you really go for it right away out of the block too much and overextend on some of these larger contracts that are out there, thinking you can win right away, that could be some fool's gold as well. But so I think that they can be a bit more aggressive though, but both with their expansion draft approach and with free agency. If they could put together the right mix, I could see them hovering around, in that division, and maybe not ultimately winning it, but at least putting some interesting element to the race in the East.
Awesome. Great thought. Like that. Brendan, anything you want to add here as we wrap up on Montreal and what we think strategy will be?
Not much, just to build on what the other two have said. I think that of the two expansion teams, Montreal is definitely in more of a position to be the Arizona Diamondbacks of this expansion, where they set things up by getting some quality players in the expansion draft, and then are able to take advantage of their division and be competitive in year 2, 3, 4 afterwards. So I can see them going. I can see them adding pieces that they're going to control. Maybe take a chance at some of the stars on bigger contracts, with the intent to continue adding to it.
Okay. All right. Great thought. So let me ask. This is a little. We didn't do this in preset, but am I hearing all three of you basically say that of our two expansion teams, I love the reference to the Diamondbacks, and of course everyone remembers 01, if I remember right, Luis Gonzalez and the famous game winner. It sounds like you're all in agreement that of the two teams, the one most likely to be competitive right out of the gate may just be Montreal because of situation, division, where they're going to be, who they might be facing, and what you think they'll construct their lineups.
Yeah, I think it's just vastly different scenarios or situations that they're both walking into. Personally.
Okay. Montreal's going to the weakest division of the four, and Portland's going to by far the strongest.
Okay. You agree with that one, Ryan? It's the strongest?
He said by far. So, yeah.
By far. Yeah, that's all he needed was to hear the by far. Okay, good. Appreciate the thoughts on that one. We'll take one very quick commercial break. When we come back, we will then switch over and start talking. What do you do if you are the Portland Stags going into the by far toughest division out there? Stick around. 2027 preview show will continue on. We'll be right back. Coming back live, it is the 2027 preview show as we get ready for our first ever expansion draft in the 22 years that eMLB has been in some way, shape, or form here. Back with the Sportsnet team of the day, Ryan Hetzer from the Seattle Mariners, Jared Rollins from the Cincinnati Reds, and Brendan McGuirk from the Baltimore Orioles. Thanks to all three of you being part of the show today. Brendan, I will start with you on this one. We just went over strategy that we think that you can expect to see from the Montreal Expos. So let's now go over to what you said was the most competitive league by far, American League West, where the Portland Stags are going to start operation. What strategy you think they're going to do coming into a division that has maybe three of the top 5 teams in all of the majors right now?
Now, each one of us, when we discussed our player we were most surprised was left off the protection list, we all mentioned young prospect pitchers.
Yeah.
And then I brought up the Minnesota Twins as having a surplus of those guys available. I think that Portland is going to be focusing heavily on stockpiling young talent that they're going to control for a while that will set them up to be competing 3-4 years from now instead of this year, next year. Being in the AL West kind of sets them up to fail to start off with. They're gonna struggle in the win column in these first couple of years, but that's okay, because if they can make some good picks here, make some smart choices going into the first year, have good draft picks, have good drafts, they can build a consistent winner down the line.
True, and it helps that Craig Cheeks earned, just luckily landed the number 1 pick. No rigging here whatsoever. We promise. It was when you saw the wheel earlier, we had no idea where it was going.
Rigged.
For those who rigged. For those who weren't here and didn't see that, we did our owner settings to determine how the owners would be operating for the teams, and we also chose who our number 1 pick for tomorrow would be. An expansion draft. Portland gets the number 1 pick, but then Montreal makes the next 2. It is a snake, serpentine, whatever word you want to use. It is a snake draft going for 75 rounds tomorrow until 150 players are picked. As a reminder, 75 players will be picked from each team, and no more than 5 players, well, bottom line, 5 players from each team will be selected. So every major league team that's currently existing knows they will lose 5 players for sure. They've submitted their protection list of 25 players. Players that had less than 4 service years were automatically exempt from being selected. So we just heard on Brendan's strategy in regards to Portland. JR, do you think that's similar, or do you have a different thought?
I'm pretty similar, of a similar mind as Brendan is. I think, Portland definitely has more of a reason to play the long game a little bit with these draft picks. And I think to their, advantage, there are a lot of those young, especially young pitchers out there to pick. There's young hitters too. Hank Porter from the Yankees organization, Joe Lynch from the Phillies organization. There's a lot of these, youngish hitters that they can aim for as well. And I think what you'll see is there's a lot of guys who are left unprotected, especially on the pitching side, who are guys who could be starting pitchers, but who have been relievers previously for their other teams, just based on, rosters and who they weren't able to beat out, or guys that, with a little bit of the OST program could improve their third pitch, could add a third pitch, could add some stamina and be starting pitchers. So, if Portland's able to really take a close look at that, I think they could find some real diamonds on the young pitching side. And then that might allow them to take a chance on, a bigger high-priced guy that's going to fill up a lot of that 200 million. We see some big contracts out there, like a Nolan Arenado. Well, if you're choiceful about the pitching that you load up, you can take Arenado in that $40 million contract. He just had 6 WAR this past season. He's going to bring popular nature to your team. He's a leader, so you can bring a lot of intangibles as you keep your fans into it and try to build a culture there to keep guys happy.
Grumpy and EVC, it's that EVC didn't type Grumpy, typed Grump you. That's why the bot's fine. Just EVC did not put your name in properly. It's just proof that this is interactive and I'm paying attention both to what JR said and what my community is doing. So, as all great thoughts, and I agree wholeheartedly. And again, a Nolan Arenado, 54 home runs last season, great defense. That could be put some butts in seats and help on the financial front. So you might even throw a flyer out for a guy that is as expensive as him. Mr. Hetzer, what are your thoughts on the team coming into your division other than kill, maim, and destroy with that Mariner Mafia of yours?
I think you prioritize youth. Anybody who's really even a fringe prospect. I think those 3 you really want to go after first. But then I think it's important, the second layer is you want to bring in to try to have some veterans who aren't making a lot of money as well, who can play at the big league level. And so that those guys that you pick, you don't have to expose them playing in the big leagues. You want them developing down in AAA, AA. So to be able to have some major league veterans on small contracts that can keep you afloat and maybe even, be guys you could flip for more prospects.
Sure.
Because that would be the name of the game. I think the more and more prospects you can collect, To that end too, you keep your payroll. I'm the Stags. I'm trying to keep it at bare minimum so that maybe I can take on a contract or two with prospects attached to it. Teams will do that sometimes in our league. In order to get rid of a contract, they might float some prospect. So that's the approach I would take if I'm the Stags.
Yeah, I've heard that strategy somewhere. I won't name names of people who have floated that in my direction. The commissioner's office just wants things to work in a proper manner where no form of requirement of looking like we endorse anything is in place. That is where we try to stay as Switzerland, as neutral, as God mode as possible. I wanted to go back on one other thing and mention it was a good point. And for those who are watching and are not used to our rules of GMs, we have in the off season the ability for you to pay cash from your team cash and be able to do what we call off-season training. We have special programs that I have designed from the 1.0 and continue to season in this 2.0 universe that we have, which allows you to have more control. So as JR was alluding, maybe one of these teams is looking at a player and saying, this guy is like a borderline back-end starter, but he's got 3 pitches, and I really think if he learns this 4th pitch this off season, it will make the difference on that type of player, and maybe that makes sense on why to make those selections. So for people to keep that in mind, there is a lot of influence by our GMs. This is a thinking strategy on if you bring someone in, you've only got so many spots that you can use the off-season training. And you want to make it count, especially for 2 teams building from scratch. So, great point about JR referencing that maybe the offseason training strategy is going to be part of some of the selections that you see, and players that might have still been fringe or maybe not ready to go, that puts them with these 2 new teams available. It dilutes the league around just enough to give some opportunity, and maybe that's the difference that makes it. So great points, great thoughts, glad to hear it. We have one last segment we wanted to talk about today, and this one was going to be a fun one. So these 3 are established GMs. They've got rosters, they've got full strategies, and they are planning on the long game with their organizations as best as possible. Pitchers only need 1 pitch, the knuckleball. Name 1 pitch you can't do in off-season training. Grumpy just called it. There you go. All right, so here's our fun. I want to put each one of these guys in the role that they're the expansion GM. And of the expansion players that are available. Now remember, you've got $200 million of total budget. You've got to have personnel. You've got to be able to field the full roster. But who would be your starting position players? Of who's available, and if you had carte blanche and you didn't have anybody block you at all, who are your top selections? Who's your players? Who's your bullpen? Who's your starting rotation? This would be most interesting. I'm going to start with Ryan Hetzer on this one.
Okay, well, I actually put together a full 26-man roster and got it at about 195 million, but we want to go with mainly starters. So I invested heavily in the rotation with my team. I just kind of went through it and kind of went more veterans with my rotation. And that's where the majority of my money went. But just some starting arms that I all put: Debbie Garcia out of the Yankees, Franklin Perez in Detroit, Madison Bumgarner, Loaizaga, and Shane Bieber. So those guys are all making pretty good money. So I really went heavy in the rotation, thinking as an expansion team, having a sturdy rotation would be important while my other younger pitchers had to develop. Then we going full bullpens?
Well, hold on a sec. I'm most curious because I was trying to pull up a couple of the players that you were going to reference. So right now I'll just pull up the Mad Bum himself, soon to be 30. He's 37. He'll turn 38 next season, 14 million. He didn't pitch terrible. His whip was still above average, and his WAR basically translated to saying that, yeah, he's earning his worth still at his age. So a good call there. But just curious, of the 5 you just said, did you do a math on how much those 5 cost? Just curious how heavy you're investing in your starting pitching and your strategy.
About upwards of about 70 million.
Okay. So a little more than a third of the total budget would go towards the starting 5, and that's fair because you want to have guys that can win games and go deep as best as you can. So
yeah,
okay.
And I guess when our mentalities we talked about, I probably took more of the expo mentality with this, choosing this roster, thinking, what could I put together that maybe could win right away. So bullpen names.
Go right ahead. Let's talk bullpen next.
I'll throw out a few bullpen names. I won't go the whole list, but earlier in the surprises, Gabriel Rodriguez, a lefty reliever in Atlanta, was one I was surprised was not protected. He threw 68 innings last year, 88 Ks, and sub-2 ERA. So he's a bullpen guy. A couple, Yadier Alvarez in Houston, Festa in Texas. I think one of my guys, Pacheco, will get taken. Riley Farrell and the Angels. We'll stop on pitching.
Who of that group would you declare as your closer?
Festa.
Festa?
No, I'm sorry, Farrell. I think in LA, he's got a proven track record as a closer in the MLB. The Marlins. Yeah,
well, Riley Farrell. You're talking Riley Farrell that's on the Angels, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Did a 3.5 ERA last season, and he's been pretty consistent in his time, even with the Indians as well. Keeps the ball down and throws a very hard fastball slider combination. So, I will say this.
If you would join us.
Joe, thank you for hitting the follow. Further proof Commish has no freaking clue how to turn off alerts at all. So let's just play this game, and it's raise your hand if you would take Tomoya Mori as a starting catcher. Nobody? Nobody? I didn't think so. Who would be your starter, Ryan, for your fantasy expansion draft?
Catcher, MJ Melendez. Is at 1.3 million, and he's not gonna, I don't think, probably come around and be a great offensive talent. He's got a little bit of pop though, and then he's strong defender, really strong defender across the board, arm, catcher ability, and he's still young, so that maybe that battle develop a bit. So that's who I went with there.
Yeah, like you said, just had his 28th birthday yesterday, sim day wise. He's a November 29th baby. And for those wondering why I had that little fun at Tomoya Mori, you may or may not know that Mori is the first ever player to sign a deal of more than $500 million. And as of this moment, he is still owed almost $302 million at a whopping $60 million each. He's guaranteed for 3 more years with 2 team options, which I highly don't think he will be accepted. I think that he will most likely not be accepted at those prices, but at least for 3 more years, he'll make $180 million. And it's hard to think that any team is going to take a chance on a player who just hit 233 with 7 homers and 48 RBIs in 128 games. Just a guess. So, all right, I was curious on that. Let's talk about the rest of your starting 9, including a DH. I'm most interested in this because we know your penchant for who you like to have in your lineup in Seattle, Mariner Mafia. But what would you do if you had to start from scratch with what's available to you?
You might see a little bit of that, but my first baseman would be Michael Busch. I think he's got, Baltimore, Brendan's unprotected list. I think he's got a good chance to bounce back, and he had a couple of really solid years with the bat before a down year last year. Matt Toke is my DH at San Francisco.
Toke is a masher, big time masher, fits right in your profile of the guys you like for sure. So,
yeah, and cheap, still on cheap contract, $2 million.
39 home runs last season, 220 average. He has shown he can hit for better than that, as he's hitting the 240s, 250s before. So again, you put him in a park. Let's just say he ends in Portland. Portland's got a very high, think Baltimore, for those of you who have not seen the Portland Diamond Complex. We can actually show you these parks so that you can get a look at the future stadiums that these teams will be playing at. Here is the Portland Diamond Complex that we will show here in a moment. Maybe. There you go. You got the high fence out here in right field. It is not a very long shot, but you still got to go 25 feet in the air in order to get that over onto the mezzanine. So a guy like Matt Toke, he might take good advantage of that, but since it's technically a short porch, very possible. Then also real quick, let's show you the revamped Le Stade Olympique. We'll be playing here again, at least for the time being. We did do an overall vote on it, but back to Olympic Stadium we will go in a nicer rendition of the ballpark that was well done. So we don't have many turf parks, but this is the one that we will be using. So very excited to bring those in. Sorry to interrupt. I thought that would be a good idea to show where we would be playing this season. Back over to you, Mr. Hetzer.
Second base with Gavin Lux. That would have been one of our early round picks. I would imagine Gavin Lux at second base. Third base was one of our surprises. We talked about Shervin Newton, and I know he's played around a little bit. He's probably more of a natural second baseman, but on my team, I slotted him in at third.
Well, he's capable enough, and with a little more work there, he might actually be at least above average to good. So he won't hurt you there. In fact, maybe he's better at third than he is at second.
Yeah, maybe. So, and then at shortstop, I went with just, again, kind of going back to my pitching staff and thinking about that veteran pitching staff. I just went with a pure defensive pick with Luis Guillorme out of Minnesota, and only making $5 million. So, just having that kind of prototypical defensive shortstop there day in and day out. And then I splurged in the outfield. That was my the rotation, and my outfield. I had put both Bellinger and Estevan Florial.
Oh, so you think so? You would go with Bellinger, who for $30 million, he hit under 220 this year, but he still mashed 44 home runs for the second straight season. So Bellinger can still rake. But in your strategy, you fall into the trap of Chris Holland saying, "Excellent, you're doing my bidding for me."
Yes. Well, when I counted all this up, it's to 195 million. So probably not the best strategy to go all the way within 5 million of your cap. But yeah, that's the way it ended up. And I couldn't, when I saw those two outfielders still there that I could add to my lineup, I went ahead and did that. And then the other starting outfielder would be Connor Scott out of Cleveland.
Yeah,
who's a solid center fielder and only making about $1 million next year.
Connor is a good versatile player. He's got speed. He's a great defender. He's not the most dominant on the offensive side, but he hit in the teens for home runs in these prior 2 years, and kind of became a bit of an afterthought as Aaron Judge once again reestablished himself. So he kind of fell on the outs. Might be a heck of a pickup for a very inexpensive player that can get you some good value, or at least he can be one heck of a fourth outfielder, I would think. So good thoughts. And yeah, to me, I surmise that your guts good enough talent. You thought about some other value plays, but you're also getting some guys that'll put butts in the seats that you are playing, that'll give you a chance to improve on that budget and be able to further build your empire of mashers from there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could probably do the same exercise 3 or 4 or 5 times and kind of get a different result. That was just the way it worked out that time through. But I think if I tried to prioritize something different or look at it in a little bit different way, it would have come out differently, which makes it's what's going to make tomorrow so interesting.
Gotcha. And in full disclosure, due to the comments from Steve Hunter in the Discord, the commissioner's office of the eMLB has no knowledge of any balls being juiced, hard core changes, or any of that. It's just, maybe these guys are just lifting pretty good. Steroids. Anyway, Brendan McGurk, let's play the game of Fantasy GM on your end. You start from scratch. What are you building for a starting rotation to start here?
Well, I got a little bit of a late jump on putting together these lists here. I started at 36 minutes prior to Aaron here because I was a late addition to the show, but I managed to get together a list. I'm going with Daniel Vilches from the Phillies.
Okay, that's a great pick. He got acquired midseason last year.
He's a cheap, effective pitcher. Johnny Lasagna, Brad Keller, Franklin Perez is kind of the veteran trio. And then as the number 5 guy, I went with Justin Gibbs. He's currently recovering from an elbow injury, but he should be healthy by midseason, and I think the talent level's there for him to be a good pickup.
He is. I have to agree with you. Justin Gibbs is a community-created player from Man with a Mic, who those of you who came over ever from the Shamrocks streams, Gibbs is in that group. A hard throwing left-hander, little bit of control challenges, but before the injury, he was trending in that direction. He's been knocking on the door in AAA for several seasons now, and you'd think he might have had an outside shot. I think that's a heck of a call right there without trying to influence, but I would be beyond shocked if he stays in Atlanta Brave after tomorrow's expansion draft.
I would agree with that.
All right, good. Let's move on. You have thoughts on some key guys you'd go out of a bullpen, and if you have a closer in mind of that group.
I only managed to get 7 of the 8 that I would need, but I took both Birdie and Alvarez from Houston, Matt Festa from Texas, Pacheco from Seattle, Riley Farrell from the Angels. So there you got 5 guys from the AL West right there. And then Ron Mauricio and Reggie Lawson is the last 2.
Okay.
Lawson being from Baltimore.
Who would you probably make your first focused closer in that mix?
By committee.
By committee.
I don't think that there's a dominant bullpen arm in that group.
Yep. You're probably right. All right.
But there's several quality ones.
So now let's go over to the field where let's fill in your roster. And obviously you were jokingly starting to raise your hand on Maury, but I could imagine that's the last thing you'd go after. What do you have in mind starting behind the plate as your starter?
I actually went with a different Cardinal. I went with Ivan Herrera with the intention that you probably take a guy like Melendez as your number 2 catcher and have them split time.
Interesting.
Herrera hit well in limited games this year.
310, 4 home runs, most of that at the end. You see he finished on a hitting streak as well, including 3 for 5 on the final game of the season to solidify his 300 average. Just impressive performance from the Panamanian. He doesn't grade out as stellar in anything, but he really made a name for himself at the end. And if they didn't have Real Muto, I would think that Herrera was not going to be on this list. So the fact you pick him early doesn't surprise me at all.
Then going down the list here, got first baseman Shervin Newton from Philadelphia. Cheap and had really good success at the plate this year.
Yep.
Gavin Lux at second, Bryce Terang from Milwaukee at third base, and then Louis Guillorme at shortstop.
So I hear a couple of familiar names. We've heard Gavin Lux also from Ryan. We also heard Louis Guillorme on the defensive side. So both of you are of a similar mindset, are going more defensive focused with your shortstops here. You're not trying to model after a Nick Spence as you've had in Baltimore for several seasons. And of course you brought in Nasim Nunez, which I think you'd probably rather have him, even though Guillorme's not bad, but Nunez is a little younger and a little more established on a longer track record of defensive prowess.
I would agree with that. Looking at shortstop, in a perfect world, you do have a Nick Spence playing there, type player who's great on offense and defense. Those kind of players are rare. So when choosing between, do you choose offense more or defense more? There's no one in the draft pool who can hit well enough to cover up terrible defense. So go defense there.
Yeah.
And play short.
Yeah, Heber was just saying, and I went looking super quick off screen, off camera, that I didn't see Daniel Vilches listed there. It was surprising if he was. I don't think Vilches is listed. I could be wrong. But I know
I was going quick. I might have missed one.
Yeah, Heber might have had a minor heart attack making mention on it, because if he is, I'd be taking him. I would, because he
is protected. I missed that.
Yeah, all good.
He's injured, and I didn't see him when I scanned the list real quick.
Just kidding, good. Hebrew.
All good. Yep. Brian having a mini freak out in the Discord, but now I think he'll be all better. I was like, oh no, I have something up. Yes, that's exactly it. So, outfield, what do you have in mind for your starting three out there?
In the corners, a little cheap but decent value, Daz Cameron from Miami and Jung-Hoo Lee from the Dodgers. Neither guy is exceptional, but both are relatively cheap and will be relatively league average at the plate. But for the third guy, I went with Cody Bellinger. And I think that's the one hitter you can really splurge on and bring, like, for all the big contracts available. I think he brings the best value between what he's going to actually do for you and how much he costs.
Gotcha. Meanwhile, I see all of you have successfully avoided the Jedi mind trick of the chat suggesting David Dahl. I couldn't imagine who might be trying to solicit that.
Well, Dahl's actually the DH.
Oh, you go with Dahl as the DH?
No, I went with Matt Toke.
Okay, I was gonna say, are you kidding?
No, and when you consider that this payroll, I did a rough calculation, ends up around 175.
Okay.
You have $200 million budget plus 25 million cash. That leaves you 50 million left over for your draft budget, your scouting budget, your player debt budget. You'll be running it pretty close, but this is a decent enough team, Will, optimizing what you got.
Yeah, and a good mix. You went with value in certain spots, but again, you're putting some guys that'll put butts in seats as well. And I think that was a pretty solid rotation you had in mind, minus Vilches. You know, you can fill in as someone else after, but we still got the drill. So, all right, let's have fantasy GM fun for Mr. Rollins now. What do you think, sir?
So, in the rotation for me, it's going to be some of the names I mentioned earlier, Griffin Canning and Carlos Rodon from the Tigers. I think, both of those guys combined make about $3.6 million for this next season. So you get pretty good value for those two guys in the rotation there. I agree with Hetz with Davy Garcia from the Yankees. I think that's a good guy to toss in there. I also have always been a fan of John Duplantier. I know he's unprotected from the Braves there. He's had a little bit of a downtime since he was kind of a really good pitcher for the A's in prior years. He's had a little bit of a tough run here, but I still think he's a guy you could potentially get some mileage out of. And then Gene Hughes, who I mentioned at the beginning. Yeah. I think he's somebody that you could go ahead and give him a shot in the bigs as the fifth starter and throw him out there and kind of see what he can do at this point.
Yeah, indeed. And I wouldn't be shocked. It's very likely that Hughes is going to be just like Olney, will most likely be selections to save a little dollars in regards to total costs and take a chance on, because what do you got to lose realistically at this point? Relievers, and who do you identify as your closer in that instance?
So I was running a similar path as Hetz here too with Riley Farrell. I think with his price tag, he's a guy that's a real proven back of the bullpen arm that you can put out there and kind of have him as your anchor. Houston as well has a couple guys that I really like, Yadier Alvarez, Zach Birdie. They're not necessarily cheap. I think Birdie's around a little over $5 million. Alvarez I think is about $3 million. So a little bit pricey as you start to get your bullpen, but I think those are a couple good arms there. I think Hetz even mentioned this. Pacheco, I think, is definitely gonna go here at some point. He's a guy I really like, so he was somebody I had in the bullpen there. Again, as a guy who, could swing between, maybe even being a spot starter here and there with his stamina. I think he could toss out there a little bit. And then one of Riley Farrell's teammates there with the Angels, Estelon Ortiz. I really like his arm. I think he's a guy that can really contribute there. Give you a lot of quality innings out of the bullpen. And then a couple of cheap guys, JT Ginn and Dan Mortal, Ginn from the Rays and Mortal from the Indians.
Dan M. Mortal.
Yeah, both of those guys I think are fairly solid, arms for a bullpen who, again, you're not going to be paying much to, and they can fill out and give you some quality innings.
And Mortal, it might give him an actual opportunity to try to earn a regular spot, as he has been for several seasons, dabbling between AA, AAA, and the majors now. So this might give him more of an opportunity to maybe have a longer-term career, a little bit more consistency, and maybe less likely to be sent down. So good call, and good mentions on some other names that have very much capabilities of being able to add value. So over to the offensive side. Who do you have in mind as a starting catcher you would want?
I thought there were a lot of good options available for catcher, both as guys who could play at the big leagues and some prospect catchers that you could have at AAA and AA. I did, in my dream scenario, pick an Angels catcher, but it is not Tomoya Mori, it's Joseph Tank.
I like that. That's a good call, and I was looking at him and wondering if anybody would mention the canon. Joe Tank is from the 1.0 universe. This is a guy who could be a starting catcher pretty much anywhere. Doesn't wow you on the offensive side when you look at how he grades. He's known as being extremely stingy on being struck out. In fact, he has struck out 33 times in over 100 games in the last 3 seasons. Again, he doesn't play as much due to Maury and the contract, but this is a guy that with the limited amount of time, he gets 150 at-bats, and he hits 294, and he gets you 3 homers, and he produces. So that's a heck of a call, and he is not going to be a slouch defensively. His arm's not considered the best, but he is a very solid kind of a, I don't know, reminds me of a Jason Varitek without being a switch hitter type of player. Doesn't wow you on the offensive side, will get you some production, but it's the defense and how he calls the game that's the biggest plus that he does. But his background and the time he's been, he's shown that he's just as capable offensively. So great call on bringing up a Joe Tank.
Yeah, I really like him, especially as a guy, that could be there and the long haul with some of these pitchers, that you would be bringing in. So really like slotting him in there. At first base, I had Rod Calderon from the Rangers. Jamie's had several guys kind of at that first base DH spot, around the big leagues, AAA, and I know he's been trying to see if he could move some of those for some prospects in return and get some value out of them. And Calderon, I think, is a solid guy. Can give you some good time at first base, and allow you not to have to overspend on somebody.
Calderon, from the Dominican, 25 years old. He is one of our short group of players that came over from the eMLB on the show universe. And all that means to you is that before Ramon Russell and the San Diego studios decided to screw up MLB The Show and no longer do year-to-year saves, not that I'm bitter or anything, 3 different versions, 9 seasons of creating a universe and getting guys like Calderon from it. We brought him over to here so we can continue to do them. That's where Joey Best comes from. That's where Ron Carney comes from. Rod Calderon, as well as a few others. Calderon, an unlikely speedster. He's 6'5", and he is fast. He is good defensively, and he grades out at average or slightly above average on the offensive side. So, again, great value pick. A guy you've got control of for a while, and you could put him to good use and really see what he's worth.
Yeah, I really think he could be an underrated guy there. At second base, I was tempted to take Bryce Terang here. I think Terang I would have as my third baseman, probably like I believe Brendan said. I kind of like going Luis Arias here. I know he's a little expensive, but he's a guy I think you can have at the top of your order or as kind of your 8-9 swing hitter that can give you kind of that second leadoff guy at the bottom of the lineup.
I don't think Luis Arias is available. Now, Luis Arriaga, from the Cubs is available, but I don't know if Luis Arias is available.
No. Maybe
Louis Arias from the Pirates is available.
He is. Probably, I'm only looking at a second base filter. That's probably why I'm not seeing him. I still don't see him. That's all right. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just pulling up and wondering if we had an instance again, but I'm not seeing him yet. No worries.
Oh well. And then shortstop. I thought shortstop. I don't know how Hetz and Brendan felt. I thought shortstop was where there was maybe the least talent available from the unprotected area. I went with Osiris Johnson from the Houston organization. Okay. Corey Seager to me is just too much money, and I don't foresee him producing like that anymore. And there just wasn't a whole lot there for me. I'm not a big Guillaume fan. I know he's a good defender, but I just decided to go cheap there with Johnson as a kind of a solid average shortstop there.
Well, if you look 2 seasons ago, Johnson hit in the 240s. That's nothing stellar, but he got you 22 home runs. He stole you 34 bases, and he's pretty solid defense. So if you can take that level of offensive production and get what you think is going to be above average defense with a guy who knows how to steal bases, probably better than going after Louis Arias. I mean, at least you get some additional production from a guy that's probably bottom third of the order.
I am seeing Arias as protected in the Cubs.
And I agree. And you know what? I was not thinking of Arias, Urias. I was thinking of ARR, the Louis Arias fan.
Oh, Urias. Okay, yeah.
So I was mixing les personnes. So, mon Dieu, le camiche. Once again, everybody.
You idiot.
I'm an idiot. All right. Thank you. All right. Go right ahead, JR.
And then in the outfield, I also had Florial as my left fielder. I think, he's somebody, you can plug in there. He's not super expensive. He can, be one of your better hitters. Jamison Hanna in center field, I think, is a pretty good value, pretty low salary, and a guy that just 2 years ago, I think he had nearly 4 WAR for the A's there. I think he could bounce back a little bit.
Sorry to interrupt. Hold that thought for one more moment. I've got a commercial that's being forced upon us. We will be right back in a moment. Please don't go anywhere. Sorry for the inconvenience. Coming back live, it is the final segment of our preview show here for the 2027 expansion draft. If you are just joining us, where the heck have you been? You missed our awesome panel here from Ryan Hetzer from the Seattle Mariners, Jared Rollins. Hey, Nersha Banko coming in with the raid. There's the raid. Thank you, Nersha. Appreciate that. I was thinking of raiding you as we are almost done here. Again, we are on the 10 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow morning. Coffee with the commish. Yes, there's Bailey's in tonight's coffee. Coffee with the commish tomorrow will be the first ever expansion draft in eMLB's 22 real-life years of existence. So hopefully I don't break anything. But we have determined that the Portland Stags will be getting the first pick tomorrow in the expansion draft. It will be a serpentine draft, 75 rounds. Both teams have $200 million budgets and $25 million of cash. So we are looking forward to seeing how that goes tomorrow. We have been talking when we just had to take the quick break. JR was playing the role of fantasy GM or expansion GM, and how would he spend his $200 million bucks? So let's finish up. You were talking outfield. Why don't we start over on the outfield, JR?
Yeah, so outfield wise, left field, I had Estevan Florial from the Yankees. I think, Hetz, I think had targeted him as well out there. A guy who can give you some pretty good production for not too expensive a price. And in center field, I'd have Jamison Hanna from Oakland. Again, he's relatively inexpensive guy who can still give you pretty good production, and even both of those guys have a lot of flexibility to play the various outfield positions if you need him to move around.
Interesting call on Hannah. He was a bit of a sleeper, kind of a sleeper guy here this year. Of course, last season he was the lone all-star for the Athletics. Nothing stellar, but still, when you look at everything he offered, including his defense, his WAR was rated at 3.5. So just a very interesting call. Again, an affordable guy who can play very capable. Maybe you have him in mind as either a bottom third of the order, possible leadoff, maybe not the most stellar leadoff, all things considered, but interesting call on him. So who is in right field for you?
Right. So right field, I was going with Tim Kelleher from Houston. Again, the Astros have a lot of talent in their system. He's a guy that, I don't think there's any one aspect of his game that sticks out a lot. He's just kind of solid tools across the board. Player who I think is ready to be in the big leagues somewhere, and the expansion drafts might be the spot that gives him a chance out there. Yeah,
interesting call also on Kelleher. He's a first-round draft pick back in 2022, 20th overall. As we take a peek at him, another guy that's a speedster, can play capable outfield, known for a level of power. Hasn't shown it yet at the major league level, but definitely has been able to produce to a degree, although this season we would say was a bit of an aberration for him. So again, a guy that probably should be better off than he has shown so far. Probably considered a bit of a disappointment to the highly expecting, higher expectations of the Astros here at their current stage of production. So maybe a new destination gives him a great opportunity. So good. Awesome. Did you name who your DH was in that conversation?
So yeah, DH wise, I was kind of going between two people, and so since Brendan and Hetz had picked Toke, I'd go with Spencer Torkelson from the Diamondbacks. Again, another guy with a lot of power, who maybe hasn't turned out as well in Arizona as they would like. So again, maybe a change of scenery here, bringing his power to a new team could really kind of unlock his talent there.
Good. He's had 35 home runs the last 2 seasons in Arizona. He is hitting, he only hit 207 last season when he hit 279 the year before. And that OPS was significantly dropped off over 200 points this past season. So again, a guy who has enormous power. He is definitely a guy who could probably in a regular season produce near 30 home runs. Yeah, you could see him hitting the ball a long way in either one of those 2 new parks. So another good call for a guy who's probably not considered very high on radars for people who chase based on scouting reports. But the numbers add up that if you can tolerate him, he could produce. But again, probably better to look at him as a DH. And since 2 new DH roles are filling up for full time, Torque may be able to get one of them for that enormous power he possesses. Good thoughts. Great thoughts, guys. So let's go in the process of wrapping this up before we call it a night. Again, we've got a super busy day tomorrow. 10 o'clock Eastern time is when this 75-round draft, 150 players, will be drafted by the Portland Stags and the Montreal Expos in a serpentine draft. Snake draft for those of you who are like, huh, serpentine? Anyway, I know I'm using lofty words. Anywho, let's have final thoughts here. Mostly just, we've talked strategy a bit, but if you were right in either a Discord DM or if you were face to face with either GT Sundown, Ken Butcher from the Expos, or if you were with Attica Online from the Portland Stags, what's your final thoughts if you're the advisor on that team as they go into a momentous occasion like this? There's a lot of excitement, a lot of nerves. There's got to be a lot of possibilities that they might do an oops at some point. So what's your final thoughts on that? We'll start with Brendan on this one.
I say don't fall victim to endowment bias. Don't be afraid to make your team better because you're attached to what you have there. It can be a bit of a trap sometimes, but I think that if you can miss more opportunities than you might mess up by being afraid to go get somebody because you don't want to let someone else go.
Okay. Sorry as I munch on pizza. I'm massively hungry here. JR, what is your parting thoughts as we go into this draft for both of our new GMs?
I think for me, I would focus on something specific to the draft at this point, and I think it's to make sure that you're not just focused on your major league team, and remember that there's an opportunity here to add some guys who may not be ready to help you for a couple of years, but could be valuable members of your organization. Adding to your prospect depth. Drop some guys into say the AA range where they've gotten far enough along that they're starting to turn out well, and you can see what they're ultimately going to become. But it's still going to be a couple of years before they're going to contribute at the big league level.
Yeah, great thoughts. And it's important to note that both teams will be fielding Winter League rosters. Winter League information will be coming immediately after the 2027 expansion draft. So both of these teams will definitely want to be able to have players that are considered eligible for that. And the only criteria is they have to have at least less than 1 year of major league service. So you got to think that there's enough players that'll be selected that will fit that criteria. Ryan Hetzer, your final thoughts.
I would stay on the draft as well with my thoughts, and I think just to stick with the plan, whatever the plan they have going in. I think you can second guess yourself, a lot in the draft of this nature, and so to whatever plan they go into the draft with, whatever the kind of the way they see it playing out, to stick with that plan and not to kind of give into that second guessing. And then I think specific to that as well, would be if, let's say there's a particular player that they have decided, I'm not going to take this guy, I'm not going to take this guy, even though maybe he's tempting for whatever reason, maybe salary. And then all of a sudden he's there later than you think. Well, then don't give in and take him. If your decision, if you gave forethought into not taking him, then stick with that. Kind of stick to your plan is what would be my thoughts.
Okay. All right. Good thoughts. I'd like to give my own parting thoughts on this. Even though I play the role of commissioner, storyteller, and neutral party, but I would say stay balanced, focus on the here, focus on the now, and focus on the future. And don't chase the rabbit. What I mean by that is if a team is, if your opposing team picks the fourth player and leaving one player left on a roster, you have to make the tough decision. Do you go after the player that you most covet from that team that will suddenly go off the board and no other player on that happens? That is going to be part of this strategy tomorrow, which is why we had a little fun exercise of which teams do we think will be first to have their 5 players selected be off the board. As soon as 5 players are removed from a roster, that team is completely off limits. We will have a full researched Google scoreboard for you to keep track on. We will do our absolute best to be accurate on that. Again, it's always possible. We are human. But the most important thing that I would give for advice is be smart on your strategy. Try to be thinking ahead on separate strategies and have that plan B in case there's a certain player on a certain team roster that's available and you're down to one person left because there's 2 picks. Before you get 2 picks, and then they get 2 picks after the first one overall, and the last one, of course. So be very careful on who you want to get, because if you choose, I'll get him on the next round, there's 2 opportunities for that team's crop of players to be completely off the table going forward. So I think that's the most important advice I can give in regards to that. But the final thought is have fun. This is an extraordinary experience. We are very excited all as a group. And again, this particular exercise today has been a lot of fun. So with that, we're going to call it a day. Looking on the raid side, I see, well, Ashley Sanders is even streaming today on MLB The Show. Dishnet's doing eBaseball Power. He's doing his Power Pro, which is always cute to watch. And Danielle Freak's doing Madden. I'll let the community decide where they want to go, so be quick on that. So it's either Ashley, Danielle Freak, or Dishnet that we'll send over to. Appreciate your thoughts so that we can lead the raid and say hello to someone out there. Again, I want to say thank you to my Sportsnet guest podcasters today. Ryan Hetzer from the Seattle Mariners, Jared Rollins from the Cincinnati Reds, and Brendan McGuirk from the Baltimore Orioles. A couple of you are saying Ashley, one is saying Dishnet, and you know, every time we raid over to Ashley, she is awesome in regards to that, and fair amount of people come checking out who we are and what we do. So we'll go over to Ash. Want to thank all of you for being here on a Saturday afternoon. Back to our litter box I go. Fluffy kitty ninjas do assassinate, and you're looking at their victim. So next time I can find some glue and tape, I'll put my head back on straight, and we will be back in front of you tomorrow, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Coffee with the Commish edition, and the first ever expansion draft in eMLB history. Montreal Expos, Portland Stags. We think they're ready. We'll find out soon enough. Maybe we'll have a show afterwards to say, what were they thinking? Who knows? Let's not put too much pressure on them. We'll have fun for now. Commish LB reminding you how you think directs your life. When you think your best, you'll be your best. So go do your best. Thanks for these guys for doing their best. We appreciate it. We'll see you all tomorrow, we hope. Have a great night. Thanks. Peace.
You jackass!